Welcome to the Delight Your Marriage podcast. You're joining me, Bella Rose, as I dive deep into the beauty, power, and truths about intimacy. Learn not only the practicals, but the heart behind what making love is all about. Delight your marriage. All right, welcome. This is Bella Rose. Thank you so much for joining me. It's an honor to have you here. So if you are listening via podcast, this is probably something you do about every week, and I want to welcome you and thank you. If you are actually watching this as a video, I want you to know that I'm a podcaster, intimacy and marriage expert, and coach. And so what I'm going to take you through is actually the first part of a 5-part video training series for husbands to help them understand how to make their wives love sex. And maybe at this point you're like, she can't even like sex, much less love it. Are you kidding me? So I understand that. I do work with husbands from around the world, helping them transform their marriage into something that is playful and passionate and a lot of fun to be in, I'll tell you. So where did I come from? How did this all start? Well, I definitely wasn't always an intimacy expert guru, if you will. I still remember him gripping my hands, even though I was begging for him to let me go and to get out of the car. And then I still remember the warm wash of shame and surprise that came over me when I heard a tap on the window and I looked over and it was the police. Apparently, a neighbor had heard us and saw what was going on and called the cops. Oh, I tried to make it seem like everything was okay, to seem like this was a big misunderstanding. But they knew something was wrong. And they made me get in my car and drive away, and he had to go in the house before they would leave. In a lot of ways, I wish I left him that day. I didn't. I continued to suffer in that marriage until eventually I realized that my soul had broken and my spirit had faded during that season. And I decided I wasn't going to do that anymore. And I did leave. Eventually, after a season of heartbreak after heartbreak, of figuring out what sex means to a man outside of marriage, I started to realize that sex wasn't about sanctity or sacredness like I thought it was, which is why I saved myself for marriage. But in that season, I went away from God and thought, you know what? Sex isn't about any of those things. It's about power, and it's about having the ability to wield it over men, because then I figured them out. But after a few heartbreaks, because turns out sex is about the heart, I decided I wanted a man who valued me and treated me well. And so I did find that husband and married him. And for a while, things were really great until the arguments and until he continued the anger and even punching walls. And I felt lonely, even though I was married. I cried myself to sleep again. I made a decision in my heart, though, that I wasn't going to fail again at this thing called marriage. I fought the urge to give up and say, well, I made the wrong choice again. Because who's the common denominator in all this? Me. So instead of deciding, well, he's the one that changed, he's the one at fault, I decided to search and learn and grow and change my behavior. And I messed up. It wasn't an easy transformation, but until I started changing, the man who used to forget my birthday, literally, didn't celebrate holidays, no kind of romance, I felt was lazy, and everything was on my shoulders, from the bills to the housework to making the money, even the motivation to do all of those things. Now that man is planning surprises for me months in advance, even in quarantine, where we haven't left the apartment of our New York City one bedroom with a couple extra walls to make sure the kids have their own private space. But we haven't left but maybe 7 times in about 9 weeks. So on Mother's Day, when I woke up to coffee in bed, this rush of gratitude and surprise came over me, realizing that, wow, this has really transformed. And as I walked into the bathroom and was surprised by all of these wonderful heart-shaped cutouts all over the mirror and the counter, and then going into the living room and finding more heart-shaped cutouts and love notes and appreciation notes from my boys who are 5 and 6 years old. And then enjoying a specially made breakfast with my preferences and dietary restrictions in mind. Later on in the day, my husband made sure I got my alone time to do some things I really love to do on my own. And when I was permitted to come out of the bedroom, I was greeted by both of my boys in suit jackets and a wonderful picnic spread out on our living room floor. My husband was also dressed up, and Frank Sinatra was serenading us in the background. There were plants in special positions, so it looked really cool, and it was dim lit with candles. So we had this wonderful meal on beautiful plates, some of our favorite plates and pottery that we have. And then there was dancing. It was just wonderful. I will say that because we do have young children, somebody eventually had a meltdown. So the romance had to take a bit of a backseat. But I will say that my husband made sure that I was able to go rest while he dealt with the meltdown and ended up putting the kids to bed. And it was just such a warm and connecting day for me with my desires in mind. And dear husbands, just to let you know, that kind of a life leads to amazing intimacy. And that's what we get to enjoy together. So I teach men to change themselves so that their wives change. It seems bizarre, it seems crazy, but I will tell you over and over again, people who have been married for decades, 40, 50 years or more, have transformed if they choose to transform themselves first. Sometimes these are men that have taken my Masculinity Reclaimed program, Be Respected, Enjoy Fierce Intimacy, and Love Being Married Again. Sometimes men take that program and their wives don't know about it. And within days, she has apologized. Literally, I'm thinking of a specific situation. She didn't know he started the program. Within days, she apologized for some of the really awful things she had said and done around intimacy. And she began doing things in intimacy that he had practically begged for in the past. And through my program, she started doing them, even though she didn't even know that he was implementing changes in himself. Another husband that's coming to mind, his wife didn't want him to do my program. And after he graduated, a couple of months later, she reached out to me asking me to work with her. And that's not a rare scenario. You might be thinking, well, my wife is way too controlling for that, or my wife would never do such a thing, or I have begged and done all the right things, Bella. Well, stay tuned. We're going to talk more about that. But let me mention, you as a husband want to feel respected, admired, and wholehearted sexual intimacy. You might be thinking, well, my wife does make love to me, but it's vanilla or it's duty sex. It's the same way every single time. It's even on the calendar. She thinks she gets it. She definitely doesn't. It's this wholehearted piece that probably is missing and very important. Men so often tell me that I can articulate their hearts, often more than they themselves can. The things that are most important to him in sexual intimacy. One is that she wants to be there, that she's craving you just like you're craving her. Another one is that she's generous with her visuals and really neat variety in intimacy. And finally, the most important attitude and desire for her is to love his member. And a lot of times men say, I thought I was perverted. I thought that pornography had changed my way of thinking. But I want to encourage you to say, you know what? Sex was God's first. That was God's idea. To give husbands about 11 erections every day didn't come from Satan. God said you are to be a sexual being and you are to have a wife that will love that. And just like wives, there are deep desires and needs that she has that can only be filled by her husband wholeheartedly. And I want to talk about that more specifically in this training. So you might be saying that she's controlling, and there's no way that this is ever going to be helpful for our marriage. Well, I wasn't just not into sex in my first marriage. I was also very controlling. I'd criticize, I'd correct, I'd teach him the right way to do things, which really was just my way of doing things. I knew in my head that men needed respect, but I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't realize I was treating him like he was my son. Not sexy, folks. I'm curious if you can relate. I'm curious if that's what it feels like in your marriage. The thing is, and this is a really big teaching point for you, men see things like a man does. If you will, you are wearing man glasses. But you don't see life the way your wife does. She's wearing woman glasses. So when you're having an argument and she brings up something that's horribly disrespectful, you are immediately enraged. And the expectation is she should get how terrible that was for you to hear. Like she should get the amount of anger that was provoked because of what she said to you. But the thing is, she's wearing woman glasses. So she's looking at that same argument and she's only seeing the things that really matter to her. It's almost like if you as a man in your man glasses are only able to see green in a specific picture, let's say. So if you're looking at a picture of a sunset and flowers and a field, and you've got your man glasses on, so the items that you're able to see are the green items. So you can see the field, you can see the trees, you can see the flower stems and leaves, for example. Now a wife, let's say wife glasses, she is looking at that same picture and she's only seeing the purple. So she can see the flowers, the actual flower arrangement, and she can see the sunset colors, and she can see the little child's raincoat that's purple who's playing in the park next to it. So she's able to see things that you can't see. So when she says, look at the purple things, you're like, what? Where? There aren't purple things. And you're like, honey, look, all this stuff is green. And she's like, are you kidding me? There's nothing green in this picture. So the point is that if you're not understanding that she's got woman glasses and you've got man glasses, you can't get to a place of understanding and generosity and giving for each other's needs. You're understanding what life as a man looks like, and she's understanding what life as a woman looks like. So for you, it's needing respect, being admired, and wholehearted sexual intimacy. And you've probably sent her plenty of books and articles and podcasts. Maybe my stuff you have sent to her, but it's not getting through. It just isn't getting through. And she's honestly probably thinking the same thing. Like, she has tried to beg you and cry and scream and force you to do things the way she wants them done, because that is the way she sees life as needing to be done. So how in the world can you change this? And you know what I want to add is, if there's any inkling in you that feels like you should already know this. Like, you should already have this thing figured out. You've been married 40 years. This should be second nature by now. Here's the trouble. 75% of marriages don't have this thing figured out. 75%, that's the vast majority of marriages, isn't it? How do I come to that conclusion? 50% of marriages end in divorce, and 25% of the marriages that stay together are unhappy. I bet it's probably rare for you to see a long-lasting couple that is passionate and playful and exciting. And a lot of times it's because we don't talk about sex. We don't talk about sex for a woman or sex for a man. We don't understand what are the different types of sex. We don't understand how we relate to each other in sex. There is a huge body of understanding that we don't touch as a society. We think you should know what to do, and if you don't, sorry, tough luck. And especially as Christians, we're like, do what you're comfortable with. But what if you want to be comfortable with more? Or what if you want to know more? Or what if you want to grow? A lot of times there's not the specifics and the practicals that really get you comfortable and get your wife comfortable. A lot of men think that they're perverts until they start listening to my stuff and taking a program, and they're like, wow, I can be a man. I can be all that God made me to be. And He designed me with sexual desires that are good if channeled in the right way. If channeled in the right way. So that's what I want to spend time with in our next conversation, right? This is our first of several training videos or podcasts. So I'll have two audios on the podcast. And then the following 3 videos are only going to be delivered via email. And here's the reason. There's obviously far more people than just husbands that fit this profile on my podcast that are listening. So I don't want to take up quite so much of the podcast time to do that. And there's going to be certain things in the latter videos that are going to have more visuals associated with it. So graphs and templates and systems that are really hard to explain on a podcast. And the other piece of it is, I think you're going to get the most value in the format of a video. And I want to give that to you. So one thing I do want to also mention here is, when you're doing these videos, it's important for you to realize that this is a process, and I do it a few days between each, so you can really digest and process and really have measurable changes in your thinking and your mindset so that you're ready for the next training. One thing to note is that I have offered free trainings in the past, and it almost breaks my heart when people reach out to me months, even years later, and they're like, is that training still available? And I'm like, it's not available anymore, and I try to direct them to other resources. But the thing is, this isn't going to be available for very long. So I'm delivering today's training today, and then next week, Thursday, you're going to get the second training, and then the rest is going to be on email. So you can sign up for this training to receive it at delightyourmarriage.com/men's training. I would love to show you a video of a man who worked with me, just one of the many men and their story. But obviously a video testimonial where he is sharing his story and you can hear from his voice and see his facial expressions and really know, wow, if he can do it, I can do it. But the problem with that is every person I work with is very private about this, and it makes so much sense. And I honor strict confidentiality with my clients. It's extremely important for us to get good work done, is for them to feel safe that their personal stories and their personal details are always extremely confidential. So here's what I invited him to do. I said, I'm curious if it would be okay for me to read the first email you sent to me and read the last email you sent to me. And he was extremely generous and was like, absolutely, and I'll even read the last part. But so let me go ahead and dive in. And as you're listening, if you can kind of put yourself in a mode of, yes, it's my voice, Bella Rose, but see if you can hear his heart through the words he says. And one of the reasons I specifically chose his story is because he has an incredible way of writing. And I have heard almost the exact phrases that he has shared in these couple of emails in men over and over and over again, probably at least dozens of times, if not hundreds. Like, this is the heart of the men who listen to me. So I'm really hoping that this is a powerful message for you. Bella, I recently came across your podcast, and after listening to a number of episodes, I felt like I had nothing to lose reaching out to you for help. I do not have the time nor strength of heart to detail everything that has gone on in my marriage in this email, but I'll try to give you the basics. After reading, if you feel as though you can help, I would be willing to reach out further. My wife and I are 51 and 50 years old and have been married for just over 10 years. It was my first marriage and her second. We dated and were engaged for 3 years before getting married. Both of us are devout Christians. In spite of that fact, we were intimate prior to marriage. Both our physical and emotional connection was strong. I know I came into the relationship with some baggage in the intimacy department, but she was absolutely wonderful about everything, and it even drew me closer to her. I was very excited for marriage and our life together. Within 2 months of our marriage, my wife had a partial hysterectomy for medical reasons. There were no physical complications as a result, and we were both okay with what it represented, no kids, because of being married in our 40s. Since her ovaries were left intact, the doctors stated that hormonally everything should be fine, and even the follow-up test confirmed it. Except it wasn't, and hasn't been ever since. I don't know if this was the cause of things, but it changed afterwards. I laughed when you and a guest were discussing the definition of sexless marriage, sex 10 times a year or less. I haven't had sex in over 3 years at all, and would probably consider our relationship sexless for at least 6 of our 10 years of marriage. The change in my wife's attitude towards sex from when we were dating and engaged to now couldn't be farther apart. We have basically become roommates in the same house. The woman I dated was easily my sexual equal. She enjoyed our physical relationship as much as I did and initiated encounters nearly as often as I did. She was adventurous and outgoing, and we both felt safe with each other. Since we were both adults, we found we could talk very openly about it, and I was confident it would not be an issue after getting married. Nothing could be further from the truth now. Even bringing up the subject now shuts her down completely emotionally. I'll admit, I made mistakes in trying to teach her and sending articles and books. I realize now that didn't help. But I also did a ton of the stuff you suggested. There were entire sessions of intimacy that revolved around nothing but pleasing her. I continually complimented her on how she looked, especially when naked. I wanted her to know I found her attractive. She felt I did it because I wanted sex. I was extremely vulnerable with her. I expressed how important our physical relationship is and how it's a way I show love to her. I told her how much it hurts to not be able to share that with her. And she seemed to head in a completely different direction. She didn't necessarily see a reason for sex in marriage unless it was for having kids, and any of the other stuff was disgusting. In 10 years, she has initiated physical encounters twice and has not touched me in a sexual way of her own accord in the past 8 years. She became so disengaged in sex that the few times we've had it years ago, I literally felt like I was raping her. That destroyed me emotionally. There's so much more I could write, but even sending this has opened a wound again. On the one hand, I've resigned myself to the idea I will never have sex again with my wife. While that makes me sad, it doesn't hurt as much as knowing I want to be physical with my wife, but am getting rejected by her. I understand the role oxytocin plays in relationships, and I've turned to outside sources for it, pornography. But it's so wrong and destructive and in direct violation of my walk with God every time I do. I just don't know what to do anymore. Well, that's the highlights of my story. If you've got the time, I'd love to hear any thoughts you might have on turning this around. I'm so completely drained emotionally. I don't know what else to do. So I'm going to call this gentleman Jerry. Just made up a name for him to keep his privacy. It's extremely heavy. He came to me with that deep, deep wound that just kept getting deeper because over and over and over again, this was their life together. He and I worked together for a few months in the Masculinity Reclaimed program. And this is the email he sent to me after graduating, even months later. He said, I don't really remember exactly how I stumbled across the Delight Your Marriage website. My marriage was not in a good place, and I remember I was searching for something, anything I could do to make it better. I read through the info Bella had on her site and decided to send an emotionally raw email right then and there. I was surprised when not long afterwards, she contacted me by phone. During our conversation, I detailed all the things wrong with my marriage, our intimacy, and even my wife. At the end of the conversation, she told me she thought she could help and encouraged me to become part of the Masculinity Reclaimed program. I was hesitant at first, but didn't know what else to do to help my marriage. It turned out to be one of the best decisions I have made for myself, my wife, and our marriage. I won't lie, I came into our sessions with a chip on my shoulder against my wife. She wasn't loving enough. She didn't like intimacy. She couldn't care for herself. She was different than the woman I married. The list goes on. It didn't take long for Bella to shoot holes in all my complaints. I soon realized my wife's attitude towards me was directly related to how I was treating her. While it seems obvious now, it certainly wasn't then. Bella challenged me to change myself first and then to see what happened with my wife. Did I push back? Yes, initially. I can be stubborn, and I don't like to be proven wrong. PSA, those things are generally not good for a happy marriage. To prove to Bella she was wrong and I was right, I dove in head first into her program. If I did my best and it didn't work out, I would know the issue was with my wife and not me. I know it's a strange way of thinking, but it was true. Imagine my surprise when my wife began to respond positively to the changes I was making. The stress in both of our lives decreased. My wife became softer towards me, and I began to feel like the days we were dating. Wow, maybe there's something to all of this. My attitude changed rapidly, and I fully embraced her program. I was determined to make the changes I needed to in order to make my marriage work. The biggest surprise, the more I changed about myself and how I treated my wife, the more my wife became the woman I wanted her to be. She began to change before my eyes. Her confidence returned. She was fun to be around. We laughed together. I realized that I was the reason for a lot of my marital strife, and it was tough to admit it. Bella was great about it and always seemed to know how to keep moving things forward and not let me beat myself up too much. Fast forward nearly a year later. My marriage is better now than it was a decade ago. I love being around my wife, and I cherish her for exactly who she is. I can't imagine being without her. And I look forward to the years we have ahead of us. Thank you, Bella, for putting us back on that path. To any guys who are considering talking to Bella, my advice is brutal but true. You are probably as much to blame with your relationship troubles with your wife as you think she is. Be prepared to fix yourself first. Swallow your pride. Commit the time and effort to working on a lot more stuff than you thought. Realize it's not going to happen overnight. And don't be discouraged by small setbacks. And celebrate every small victory. Wow. Praise God. Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. It's just amazing. When I, at the last piece here, I asked, when I was just a couple days ago, asking him if I could read that email, he actually responded with an email I also want to read for you. He said, it was hard for me to believe that I felt that way just a year ago. He said, my wife and I, despite all the time that we've been spending around each other recently, we both kind of joke that if this had happened prior to meeting with you, we don't know what would have happened. We are in a really comfortable, genuine place, and we are really happy to be with each other. He said, I can tell you when I wrote that email, I thought I was the only guy dealing with those feelings. I cannot imagine what it's like for you to be on the receiving end of such emotion all the time. You think my job is demanding. Letting you post the letter is a leap of faith for me. I'm still a pretty private person, but God has laid it on my heart that doing this will help others, and I feel comfortable with you as his helper. I am not known for my effusive praise, but you have a gift and an ability to connect with people in a way I have seen in few others. Good luck with everything, and thanks again for touching base. I'm willing to help in any way I can. Praise God. Thank you so much, Jerry. I really so appreciate you allowing me to share your story. So how do you start viewing life in a way that you can start to see purple things? You can start to see how your wife sees life. Sadly, a lot of men are making a huge mistake in this area. And that's what I want to clear up and empower you so that your wife is going to want to make love to you, so that you can have the kind of transformation that Jerry has. You know, if you are in a boat and there's a bunch of holes in the bottom and it's sinking, what's the best thing to do? Is it to start bucketing out the water? Or is the first thing you've got to do is stop the holes, stop up the holes, and then you bucket out the water? So the first thing we've got to do is stop the wrong things so we can then start the right things. So that's what I want to work with you on in our next call. I mentioned again, this is a 5-part video series, so I think it's going to be extremely valuable for you. Only part of the program, part of these trainings are going to be on podcast. The rest is going to be delivered via email. So go to delightyourmarriage.com/men's training. That way you can be signed up. One thing that's really important is a lot of email servers, whether you're you're on Gmail or Yahoo or Hotmail or whatever email you use, a lot of times they think that my stuff is spam. And I'll tell you why. Because I talk about intimacy, they think it's the bad kind of sex stuff. So they'll send my stuff to spam, even though I have dedicated followers that are like ready and raring to get my content. So here's what you need to do just to be completely sure. And these are my clients that I literally have email communication with on a regular basis. Suddenly some of my stuff will go to spam. So here's what I would love for you to do is when you do sign up, my first email to you is going to be a welcome email. If you can make sure that goes into your inbox, and if it's not in your inbox, if it's in your spam, check your spam, make sure that it's in your inbox. And the second thing is to add Bella at Delight Your Marriage as a contact. And that way you can make sure that you get this video training, because it's very possible you'll miss it otherwise. That's happened in the past, and people haven't been able to attend webinars because the email filter thinks I'm sending bad stuff. So I don't want you to miss it. So please go ahead and do that extra step to make sure you can get this valuable training. Also, if you want to really get your questions answered about your wife and your situation, it would be really helpful for me to receive that. So if you can go and fill out a survey that I'm basically asking you specific questions about your situation, it helps me to know, okay, here's where you're coming from, so I can address those things. As I mentioned, the masculinity reclaimed, be respected, enjoy fierce intimacy, and love being married again. I am refreshing that entire program. It's kind of like a 2.0 program. There are different included bonuses like Wild Romance. This entirely brand new program that I'm thrilled about is included. And there's tons of other bonuses that you'll find out about, but I want to make sure I'm including everything that you need with your situation. And if you can fill out that survey, it's going to help me with this free men's training that you're signing up for. And it's also going to help me if there's any items that I've left out in the full Masculinity Reclaimed program that's going to be live in a couple of weeks from now. So stay tuned for all of that. All right, well, let me wrap up this session with a note about my transformation story from the very beginning. I shared that I had a very horrible go at my first marriage. It was horrible in so many respects. I still can tell the effects that it has on me emotionally and mentally and even physically to some extent. God has been so generous and kind that He taught me through that. And He taught me about what it means to have a horrible marriage and how that affects everything in your life in a negative way. And so if you are going through that, I want you to know, I hear you, I have been there, and there is hope. When I read Jerry's story to you right just now, if there was strings that were pulled on your heart, I hope that you have restored even a glimmer of possibility that things could change. Because let me tell you something. If I knew what I know now about men, about what I was missing when I was looking through my woman glasses, if I could have understood that and then practically have systems of transforming it, I truly believe that horrible marriage would have transformed into a joyful marriage. And I said this, and I say this full well grateful that I have the marriage and the husband I have today. He knows I say this because this is true. If I knew what I know today, I would not have to have endured that hell. And so that's what I want for you. That's what I get to help men with who literally were separated when we got started. And now he attracted his wife back and they have incredible connection and intimacy. God is a God of transformation. And the question is, are you going to be more committed to your fear than to your faith that God may be able to do something new in your marriage? I want to challenge you with that. Are you more committed to your faith or your fear? And no matter what, it's completely risk-free for you to do this men's training with these several videos. I'm going to give you tons of value and content that I hope will you'll walk away from it and say, wow, I had no idea. There's so much more. Awesome. Okay, so sign up at delightyourmarriage.com/men's training. Be sure to add my email, bella@delightyourmarriage.com as a contact. And if you do, go ahead and fill out that survey. It's going to really help me answer your questions and serve you the best. I'll go ahead and pray for us. Father, I thank you for the gentleman who is listening. Lord, you know his heart. You know the difficulties he has been through. I am so honored that men share their hearts with me. I'm so honored that they cry when they speak to me often, or when they listen to my stuff. There are tears that well up. These are big macho men, because this is a safe space to explore and to be vulnerable and to realize that you care about their hearts. You care about their hearts. Father, I ask for an infusion of hope into them, even today, even right now. God, you are the God of miracles, and I ask in Jesus' name that you get all the glory for Jerry's transformation and other men's transformation just like him. Lord, that you are the one that turns the heart of stone into heart of flesh. You are that God, but we get to be your hands. We get to be the instruments. We get to be in your plan. So I ask God for the grace for this husband to have a curiosity in his heart that maybe, just maybe, he doesn't see everything because he's looking at it through the glasses that he's supposed to have. You gave him those glasses. But it is our opportunity to see more than what we see right now. Lord, I thank you that you are moving even now in his heart, in his life, in his marriage, and you care about him. In Jesus' name. Amen. All right, folks, listen, thank you for listening. I'm so honored and grateful for your time. And I do hope that I see you on the other side and you persist in a little bit of technology effort to join me in that free video training for you. Go to delightyourmarriage.com/men's training, and I'll see you there. God bless you. Bye.